The British branch of what is called the Hidden Hand, also called the Deep State, the Illuminati, and the Masons, among other names, created, financed, and armed Zionism in the beginning of the 19th century to use world Jewry, initially Jewish, European, and later Jewish American citizen, as cannon fodder in its colonial project in the Arab world, calling it the Greater Israel Project. Despite rumors of Jewish programs, the reality was that Jewish European citizens were flourishing in their countries and living comfortably and safely in their own perfected choice of seclusive ghetto communities, following the teachings of the Torah not to mix with the Goyim. Zionism needed a dramatic shock that would force the Jews to leave the safety of their communities and immigrate to Palestine. Secular Jewish politicians started a media campaign offering the Judaic solution to the pogroms by urging world Jewry, it's a weird word, Jewry, world Jewry to immigrate to the Promised Land, Palestine, to establish a Jewish-only state. Leon Pinsker set early groundwork with his 1882 pamphlet Auto-Emancipation, urging Jewish self-liberation after Russian pogroms. Proto-Zionist groups like Hoveve, Zion, Hoveve, I don't know how you say that, Zion, active from the 1880s, also promoted the settlement in Palestine. Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism, published in his book Der Judenstaat in 1896, with the help of his close ally and co-organizer Max Nordau and of Nathan Birnbaum. Herzl organized the first Zionist Congress in 1897 to call for the establishment of a Jewish-only state in the Promised Land of Palestine. For this to happen, Herzl explained that it is essential that the sufferings of Jews become worse, and suggested to induce anti-Semites to liquidate Jewish wealth, thus the birth of Zionist false flag attacks against Jews. Zionist efforts to scare Jews from anti-Semitism were not that successful even after World War I, although an aggressive media campaign was launched claiming that 6 million, the Jewish magic number, East European Jews had been persecuted or murdered and starved to death, urging world Jewry to donate money to help the Jews immigrate to Palestine. After the end of World War I, between 1918 and 1933, even before Hitler came to power in Germany, major articles in renowned Western newspapers such as the Montreal Gazette and the Atlanta Constitution, New York Times, among others, regurgitated this 6 million number. They urged Americans to favor a larger Jewish immigration into Palestine, stating that Great Britain has it within her power to throw open the gates of Palestine and let in the victimized and persecuted Jews escaping the European Holocaust. Remember, a land without a people, people without a land? No, it has people. Jesus of Nazareth, Palestinia. The Roman state of Palestine. Anyway, before World War II, Jewish Germans flourished in Germany, particularly in business and banking. Jewish S. Japhet Company Bank in Frankfurt had a lot of influence on the German economy and the government. In the 1930s, almost 60% of all Jewish German marriages were interracial. Less than 3% of Germany's 500,000 Jews belonged to the Zionist movement. Jewish Germans were considered a primary Zionist target for infiltration. Though money, Zionist Jews took over Jewish newspapers, businesses, and social organizations like what is happening now in the United States. Despite all the efforts of Zionists campaigning to spread their ideology, urging Jewish Germans to immigrate to Palestine with all their wealth to build the state of Israel, Jewish Germans rejected and oppressed Zionism. They asserted emphatically that we as German Jews are Germans and wish to remain such. We are German citizens professing the Jewish faith, and our aim is absolute equality and assimilation as Jews without giving up our Judaism. Learning from the Bolshevik and Ukrainian Holodomor genocides, Zionist Jews decided to adopt the strategy of false flag terrorist attacks against non-Zionist Jews to force them to immigrate to Palestine. A false flag attack is the concept where an attack with some sort of terrorist atrocity is blamed on one party but is actually planned, organized, and paid for by the other party, who quite often is an intelligence agency. To have power and authority to oppress Jewish Germans, Zionist Jews enlisted the Nazi army and police force, or capos. In his book, Hitler's Jewish Soldier, Brian Riggs states that 155,000 Nazi soldiers had Jewish blood, including some generals. One of these generals, SS Lieutenant General Horst Hoyer, submitted a report in 1952 on the role Nazi Jews played in the Holocaust. Implementing the final solution plan were Jews named, oh, I should know this, Sonnenschein, Zuckerhorn, Spitz, Lowenstein, Gregor, and Fechler, among others, in his 2007 book, The Underworld Order. Christopher Story, the only non-Jew working at the Jewish banker S.J. Fitton Company at the time, confirmed that many Nazis who planned and implemented the Holocaust were in fact Jews. When he mentioned this in front of a female Jewish co-worker, she explained, "Did you not know that the Jew's greatest enemy is another Jew?" Meaning a Zionist. Zionist Jewish German soldiers used to arrest adult members of Jewish families and transport them to labor concentration camps to manufacture mainly weapons for the German army. Judenrat, or Jewish councils of rabbis and influential figures established by Reinhard Heydrich, a leading SS and Gestapo official, to carry out German instructions in the ghettos. Under the pretense of saving young Jewish lives, Judenrat and the Jewish Agency used to kidnap and smuggle Jewish children and teenagers out of the Germany into Poland and to Iran, then later to Jewish yeshivas in Palestine to be raised as Israeli militia. The Holocaust was the largest and worst Zionist false flag terror attack against world Jewry. Rabbi Moshe Schoenfeld, a Haredi ultra-Orthodox rabbi accused of Zionists of collaborating in the Nazi slaughter of European Jewry directly and indirectly in his 1977 book, The Holocaust Victims Accused, and 1980 Genocide in the Holy Land, he stated, "The Zionist approach that Jewish blood is the anointing oil needed for the wheels of the Jewish state is not a thing of the past. It remains operable to this very day. Zionists are war criminals. Zionists are the most dangerous enemies of the Jewish people. With them, no compromise are possible. Orthodox Jewry must fight them until they are destroyed." During World War II, Palestinian Arabs welcomed some Jewish German refugees to stay in Palestine, which was under British mandate at the time. Yet in 1935, the discovery of the arms shipment destined for the Zionist Hagandah terrorist group aroused suspicion and concern that the Zionist movement was conducting its state-building project with British permission, the Balfour Declaration. A Palestinian uprising known as 1936 to 1939, the Great Arab Revolt, erupted against further Jewish immigration. Failing to violently suppress the revolt, the British government came up with the Peel Commission, recommending partitioning Palestine into Jewish and Arab states. This intensified the revolt, so they came up with Woodhead Commission, annulling the partition. And in 1939, the British government issued the white paper restricting Jewish immigration to Palestine to 75,000 within the next 5 years. Seeking to enforce Jewish immigration restrictions according to the white paper mandate, the British authority decided to deport about 1,800 such illegal immigrants who had just arrived at the port of Haifa, Palestine, on the Zionist-sponsored ships of the Pacific, Milos and the Atlantis. These recently arrived immigrants were loaded on a bigger ship, the SS Patria, to be shipped to British colony of Mauritius. Before setting sail, the ship was blown up and sunk by members of the Zionist Haganah terrorist group. Let's get them all together on a boxcar. The precursor of Israeli army killing 252 Jewish people because they got them all on a boat and then they took it out. Originally, the Haganah claimed that the passengers blew up the ship, Masada style, to protest British refusal to let them settle in Palestine. Later, they admitted that rather than let the passengers go to, here it is, Mauritius, they blew up the ship for propaganda purposes. The Haganah officer in charge of the operation was Yitzhak Sadeh, who had authorized to blow up the ship from the Moshe Sharet, S-H-A-R-E-T-T, Sharet, I guess, Moshe Sharet, a former Israeli prime minister who explained that Patria's memorial service in 1958 that sometimes it is necessary to sacrifice a few in order to save many. Opposing the white paper mandate, Zionist terrorism groups Irgun, Lehigh, Stern perpetrated many terror attacks against British facilities, personnel, outposts, and headquarters. The most renowned attack was the bombing of the King David Hotel, the headquarters of the British forces in Palestine, by the Zionist Jewish Irgun terrorist group headed by Menachem Begin, who later in 1977 became Israel's prime minister. In 1948, the illegal, unjust, and immoral UN Resolution 181, Palestinian Partition Plan, was approved, confiscating large part of Palestine from its original owners, the Palestinians, and gifting it to the Zionist Jews. Immediately, David Ben-Gurion, the leader of Haganah, whatever, gave authority to Executive Plan Delay, also called Plan D, not like the Samson option, I'm guessing, which was already set up waiting for the right time for execution. Plan Delay was a set of 13 offensive military operations to occupy key Palestinian territories, fortify borders, and neutralize Arab forces and villages through encirclement, destruction of villages, and expulsion of their Palestinian residents. You know, like they did in Gaza, and like they're pretty much doing in Lebanon right now. A million people displaced. Despite the complete erasure of more than 400 Palestinian villages, towns, and communities, the genocide of still not officially acknowledged and counted Palestinian victims, and the expulsion of at least 750,000 Palestinians out of their homeland, making them refugees in foreign countries. There were still many other Palestinian residents who remained in their towns. They offset the Palestinian Jewish-Israeli population ratio. Israel needed to attract Jews to boost its own population, to work the newly vacated farmland to fill up its military ranks. But many Jews are set comfortably in their countries and refuse to immigrate to Israel despite all the economic incentives and religious callings. You know, if they did all go home, maybe it wouldn't be such a mess over there. Maybe they wouldn't be inviting their own destruction. Maybe the Zionists wouldn't be in charge of bringing such hatred and destruction towards the Jewish people. You ever thought of that? To encourage, actually to force, Aliyah, immigration to Israel, Zionist Jews resorted to a systematic anti-Semitic, I'm so tired of the semantics, false flag terror attacks against the large Jewish communities in the Arab world. After the fall of Al-Andalus, Spain in 1942, the Spanish Reconquista, and the forced persecution and expulsion of the Jewish Arabs, the Muslim Arab world and North African coastal region, in Egypt and Levant area, and even in Iran, welcomed their Jewish Arab brothers who lived peacefully and flourished socially, economically, and politically within these Muslim majority communities until the illegal establishment of colonial Israel, after which Zionist Jewish Israelis started targeting them. Zionist Israeli Mossad false flag attacks against Jewish Arabs were numerous. I will mention only three main attacks here. For almost 2,000 years, Jewish Iraqi communities in Iraq were well integrated and lived peacefully with their Christian and Muslim Iraqi neighbors. With their wealth and political affluence, they fit neatly in the middle class of the country. They consider themselves Arabs of Jewish heritage who vehemently rejected the Zionist ideology to incite hatred and division between Jewish and Muslim Iraqis. Again, I'm going to go back to that. There's a typo in 2 Corinthians. We're commanded to serve God, not religion. May there be no denominations among you. To incite hatred and division between Jewish and Muslim Iraqis, disguised British and Zionist Jewish agents such as Hashura military group instigated the terrorist attack on Jewish community in Baghdad on June 1st and 2nd of 1941, known as Farud Pogrom. Alongside the Jews who were killed, many Muslim Arabs who rose to defend their Jewish neighbors were also killed. In 1949, Israel sent its spy, Mordecai ben Porat, to Iraq. He met with the then Iraqi Prime Minister Nur el-Said, suspected to have Jewish roots, and promised him financial incentives to enact a bill that would lift citizenship of Iraqi Jews and to issue one-time exit visas to Jews wishing to leave the country. Once such a bill was approved by the Iraqi parliament in 1950, the Jewish Iraqi communities were hit by a wave of anti-Jewish terror attacks, bombing their synagogues, their stores, their cafes, and their neighborhoods. Following the attacks, leaflets began to appear, urging Jews to flee to Israel. Yosef Basri and Shalom Salia, Jewish Iraqis, were arrested, convicted of the bombings, and executed. Yet bombings did not stop and drove panicked Jews to obtain exit visas and leave for Israel. Mission accomplished. Flights from Iraq and Iran into Cyprus, then to Israel, were carried by British and Israeli airlines to transfer Jewish Iraqis to Israel in an operation called Ezra. Better than Ezra, good rock band. And Nehemiah, also known as Operation Alibaba. Alibaba. Don't you want to go buy something from them now? Ooh, Naim Giladi, a Jewish Iraqi who was enlisted by the Mossad to smuggle Jewish Iraqis to Iran and then to Israel. He and his team were arrested, tortured, and imprisoned by the Iraqi authorities. He then escaped and fled to Israel, only to discover that the bombings in his Jewish Iraqi communities had been engineered by his fellow Zionist Mossad agents to dupe Jews into immigrating to Israel. He describes the Jewish Iraqis' attacks in detail in his article, The Jews of Iraq. Galaldi reveals in his book, Ben Gurion's Scandals, how the Haganah and the Mossad eliminated Jews. That the crimes committed by Zionists against Jewish Iraqis, in their frenzy to import raw Jewish labor, about 125,000 Jews left Iraq for Israel in the late 1940s and into 1952. Most because they had been lied to and put into a panic by what I came to learn were Zionist bombs. The principal interest Israel had in Jews from the Islamic countries was the supply of cheap labor, especially for the farm work that was beneath the urbanized Eastern European Jews. Ben Gurion needed the Oriental Jews to farm the thousands of acres of land left by Palestinians who were driven out by the Israeli forces in 1948. In his book, Three Worlds, Memoirs of an Arab Jew, the distinguished Jewish British historian and emeritus professor of international relations at the University of Oxford, Avi Shleim, originally Jewish Iraqi, agreeing with Galaldi's narrative, has uncovered undeniable proof that Zionist agents were responsible for targeting the Jewish community in Iraq and within the Arab world in general, pushing them to flee to settle in Israel. Zionist agents adopted the same terror attacks against Jewish Moroccans. Morocco had the largest Jewish community in the Arab world before 1948. Jewish Moroccans lived in distinct quarters called mullahs, with their own walls, courts, synagogues, and religious schools, and common feature in, maybe I didn't say mullahs, Mellaahs, not mullah, mellahs, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, with their own walls, courts, synagogues, and religious schools, and a common feature in Moroccan cities. They flourished socially, economically, and held political positions. They were a main target for Zionist ideology, which they opposed. Their rejection of Zionism was apparent in their 1940 Union Moroccan newspaper, yet after 1948 establishment of colonial Israeli state through operations Kadima and Yakin, the Jewish agency was able to smuggle about 90,000 Jews, especially among the poor communities, through neighboring Algeria to Israel. When discovered, this smuggling operation created some anti-Jewish riots in the border cities of Ojuda and Jarada. Handling the situation, Sultan Mohammed V publicly reaffirmed the traditional protected status of Jews and urged them not to express any solidarity with Israel. To reignite anti-Jewish sentiment, the Israeli Mossad sunk the smuggling ship Egaz in her 14th trip in 1961 with 44 Jewish Moroccans on board. It was revealed by Dr. Yigal Ben Nun, an Israeli historian in Bar Ilan University, in his study The Reasons for the Departure of the Jews from Morocco, published in the Israeli Yedioth, oh my goodness, Haranoth, that the Israeli Mossad followed directive from the foreign minister, then Golda Meir, to sink the ship in order to create a political and social crisis in Morocco that eventually led the Sultan to ease immigration restrictions. By the 1800s, around 200,000 Jewish Moroccans left the country, mostly for Israel, with other few going to France, Canada, and the U.S. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of Jews scattered all over the globe, but the largest concentrations are in the United States and Israel. As a matter of fact, I think our 2.5% of the population is 7 million plus, and I think it's actually more that's actually in the Middle Eastern state of New Jersey. But anyway, Jewish Egyptian communities were no better than Jewish Iraqis and Moroccans. Jews were rooted deeply in Egyptian culture. They had their synagogues, schools, businesses, and their newspapers. Before the establishment of Israel, Jewish Egyptians occupied prominent social, cultural, and political positions. They rejected Zionism, knowing very well that it would create only hatred and division. The creation of Jewish Israel on stolen Palestinian land had a tremendous effect on the rise of anti-Jewish sentiment within the Arab world. Imagine that. After the bombing of a residential neighborhood in Cairo during Ramadan by the Israeli Air Force in 1948, a spontaneous demonstration march to Jewish quarter took place, followed by a bomb detonation in the Jewish uh, Kiryat quarter, killing 22 Jews. Anti-Jewish hatred was exacerbated after the failed 1945 Israeli terrorist option, Susanna, spelled different, also known as the Lavon Affair, referring to the Israeli Defense Minister Finas Pinhas Lavon. Israeli military intelligence handlers Aviram Dar, Avram Elad, and Mordecai Ben Zur recruited Jewish Egyptians, Moshe Mazuruk, Shmuel, blah, 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 blah. I'm not doing all these names, among many others, to plant bombs in Alexandria and Cairo to incite hatred and division. The bombings targeted post offices, railway terminals, libraries, and theaters, among other targets. Keep in mind, we bombed a bridge, we are bombing hospitals, we're bombing educational institutions, civilian targets, and all kinds of that shit. We are doing what the IDF does. And the IDF basically told the Third Reich, hold my Stein. Okay? Because they genocided way more people than the Germans ever did. But anyway, pay attention. After one bomb prematurely detonated, the Egyptian authorities arrested 13 members of the terrorist group. The operation also included the assassination of the anti-Jewish immigration to Palestine. The British minister resident in the Middle East, Lord Moyne, Walter Edward Guinness, and his driver, Eliak Hakim and Eliab Ben Suri, Lehi, members of the Zionist underground terrorist group, who were captured and executed. The anti-Jewish hatred was intensified after the 1956 war against Egypt, known as the Suez Crisis War. Y'all starting to remember some of this? Or the tripartite aggression, never heard it called that. After Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, Israel joined Britain and France in their sudden aggression against Egypt. Egypt suffered, by the way, 3 jewels of the Lord's crown. Assyria, his handiwork, because he loved the mountains. Egypt, his people, which coincidentally are... Where'd they hide Christ at? In Egypt, right? Spent his childhood in Egypt. Did you know that 80% of the population is black? I'm not saying anything. Christ doesn't care about the color of your skin. He cares about the color of your heart. But I'm just saying it's interesting. So Assyria, my handiwork, because I love the mountains. Egypt, my black people. And the least of all, Israel, my sketchy inheritance, 4 times turned away. Egypt suffered significant military and life losses. The war ceased. I said seized. The war ceased when American President Dwight Eisenhower pressured... Why did they use seized? It would be ceased with a C, not a seize like a seizure. Wow, that's a typo. I haven't lost respect for the article because I've read it already, along with all this stuff. But maybe this won't be censored. The war ceased when American President Dwight D. Eisenhower pressured the tripartite and withdrew. Faced with the resulting severe discrimination, Jewish Egyptians left the country in huge waves. Jewish Arabs within the rest of the Arab states were hit with similar Zionist false flag attacks to push them to immigrate to the alleged safety of the Jewish-only state of Israel. Well, we know there's no safety there now, is there? Jews are needed in Israel to fill up the illegal, newly built colonies on stolen Palestinian land. Oh yes, come, get your Stargate AI custom boutique vaccine and receive 3 nights free at the Gaza Gazebo Hotel and Casino. Fucking asshole. Anyway. Stolen Palestinian land and to enlarge the Israeli terrorist forces to implement the gradually encroaching Zionist main plan. Greater Israel, unfortunately for Israel, after every military conflict it had with its Arab neighbors, wave of Yerida, Hebrew for immigrating out of Israel, is carried by many of the young generations to avoid compulsory military draft. Israel is in constant need of new blood. False flag terror attacks, this time targeted Western Jewry in Europe and the Americas for 2 main reasons. First, to manipulate anti-Semitic myth to attract educated Western Jews to Israel, and second, to suppress the growing pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli political movements. Pay attention. British intelligence whistleblower Annie McCaughan, former MI5 intelligence officer, talks about some of these Israeli false flag attacks in a 45-minute interview. Very important to watch, actually. Yeah, again, one more time. Annie M-A-C-H-O-N, Macon, Annie Macon, MI5, 45-minute interview, where she reveals I can get the link, but I can't share it because even though I verified myself, I can't share links. Why is that, YouTube? Eat a dick. Very important to watch, where she reveals very interesting and eye-opening facts about a few false flag operations against Israeli embassies in England and Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Israeli Mossad linked to the 7/7/2005 attack in England and the 9/11 attack in USA. Huh! In March 1992, a pickup truck bomb destroyed the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, killing 29 people, mostly Argentine civilians, and injuring over 242. None were Israelis. In July 1994, there was a bombing of the Asociación Mutual Israelite Argentina, AMIA, a Jewish community center in Buenos Aires, killing 85 people and injuring 300. In both cases, Iran and Hezbollah were accused of planning and executing the attacks. How about that? In July 1994, a car bomb exploded in front of the Israeli embassy in Kensington, London, causing only structural damage. Two Palestinian engineers, Samar Alami and Jawad Batmeh, were two anti-Israel activists, were falsely convicted and sentenced to 20 years despite lack of any evidence connecting them to the bombing. Annie Macon reveals in the interview that all these bombs were highly sophisticated devices built by highly technical experts. She alleged that MI5's internal assessment concluded that Israeli Mossad had staged these attacks. After revealing these suspicions, she and her partner were fired and then imprisoned. Since its inception, Zionism planned to sacrifice some Jewish lives to justify the many genocidal crimes the Israeli terrorist army has been perpetrating against Palestinians since 1947. Again, one more time. Since its inception, Zionism planned to sacrifice some Jewish lives to justify the many genocidal crimes the Israeli terrorist army has been perpetrating against Palestinians since 1947. Gaza genocide and occupation to extract natural gas from the Mediterranean coast and to build East-West Bridge, rivaling Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, was planned a long time before October 7th attack, which, in my opinion, was all for the cameras. Through their internal spies and their surveillance drones flying nonstop over Gaza Strip for 24 hours monitoring the military exercise conducted by the Palestinian resistance faction, Israelis knew exactly the time and the tactics of the October 7th attack. A 20-year global war on terror. We knocked them out of 747s and we reduced them to glider buggies. Wow, isn't that a victory? Israeli soldiers guarding the Gaza border revealed you can't land a bird on a wire out there and they wouldn't know about it. They didn't respond for hours. Israeli soldiers guarding the Gaza border revealed that at the morning they had received orders to stand down for 6 hours before their morning rout on the fence. Thus allowing Palestinian fighters to penetrate the fence freely and take prisoners and hostages. Palestinian fighters' goal was to take Israeli prisoners hostages to exchange them with their own Palestinian prisoners, which, by the way, are getting their bowels ruptured with broom handles on a daily, and nobody cares, and nobody has cared. How's that for a war crime? The ICC in The Hague, it doesn't matter because Trump called. There's no war crimes against. There was. Bibi would land in countries, he would be arrested. Trump made that all go away. So you think it's going to matter if Trump commits war crimes? Israeli leaders penetrate the fence. Really? Oh, God. Talk about Palestine. Yeah, they've been penetrating Palestinians. Yeah, I lost like 4 viewers. I saw. I don't care. It's the truth. They argue that they have the right to do that. They have the right to rupture the bowels of Palestinian prisoners with broom handles because they're sick. Anyhow. Fighters penetrate the fence freely and take prisoners hostages. Palestinian fighters' goal was to take Israeli prisoners hostages, exchange them with their own Palestinian prisoners, blah, blah, blah. Israeli leaders were waiting for this attack to justify their Gaza genocidal plan. To make this justification more convincing, they ordered the Israeli army to implement the Hannibal Directive. And I'll tell you what that is. That means, well, if you have to, just kill some of our own. And that's what's about to happen. Our finest are being offered up as fodder to polarize the American public, to erase all his missteps. So we're in this. Once the caskets start coming home en masse, this country will be polarized. It will forget about everything that got us involved in it. This directive, the Hannibal Directive, instructs Israeli army, particularly helicopter fighters, to use any means necessary to prevent the capture of any Israeli soldier or citizen, even if it means killing them. Thus, the army killed many Israelis, shelling their homes and vehicles while driving away from the fighting in this video. Max Blumenthal, everybody knows who Max is, editor-in-chief of the Gray Zone, discusses his own investigations, the nature and results of this directive. As a result of the 2 years of the October 7th operation, and especially after the 12-day Israel-Iran war, during which Iran rained its devastating missiles on Israel, a heavy wave of Yerida, I don't know what Yerida, exit and immigration of Jewish Israeli families took place. Yeah, everybody got out. According to the official data released by the Israeli Central Bureau of Statistics and published by the Israeli newspaper Yedioth Ahronoth, whatever, almost 69,300 Israelis had left the occupied territories during 2025 alone. And I got news for you. During the first 12-day war that they got us involved in, you know, all the rich ones, they got on their yachts and they got on their planes and they flew out to Caicos and they bolted. But anyway. Anyhow, during 2025 alone. In contrast, only about 19,000 returned during the same period. Zionist Israeli population is declining. A false flag attack against world Jewry was needed to attract at least 1 million Jews to Israel to fill up its dangerous vacancy. The Hanukkah celebration on the 14th of December 2025 at Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia represented the perfect opportunity. Alleged Muslim father-son duo of Sajid and Naveed Akram attacked the celebrating crowd with 4 hand grenades that failed to detonate and opened fire, killing 15 people and injuring dozens more. This attack was supposed to be manipulated to incite Islamophobic anti-Semitic hatred against Jews. Unexpectedly, and out of the written script, a 43-year-old Muslim Syrian Australian Ahmad El-Ahmad attacked and disarmed one of the terrorists, and he was shot a few times in the process. Alleged Muslim Naveed Akram turned out to be Israeli soldier David Cohen, a proud Jew, as he described himself on Facebook page profile before it was deleted prior to the attack. Arsen Ostrovsky, an Israeli attorney and CEO of the International Legal Forum, also considered one of Israel's top propagandists and who reportedly survived October 7th attack in Gaza, had just recently moved to Sydney, Australia. He posted of a selfie of himself being bloodily injured by the body terrorist. Grok, Elon Musk AI chatbot, identified his alleged blood as corn syrup and fake blood used in movies and special effects rather than real blood. And then there's a picture of him actually with a makeup. This image appears to be staged. There's actually a picture here of the makeup artist fixing the dude up. I guess AI ain't so dumb after all. This false flag terrorist attack has been used to divert attention from Israel's erasure of the Gaza Strip and its genocide of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, yet claiming that Jews are being persecuted everywhere. A claim that goes back deep in ancient history. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar hastened to call on world Jewry, particularly those in Australia, Europe, and Canada, to immigrate to Israel to escape from the growing anti-Semitic hatred. The Israeli Prime Minister, criminal terrorist Benjamin Netanyahu, claimed that world Jewry everywhere are at the front line, facing a global wave of anti-Semitism, which calls for the creation of guarding militias for the Jewish people, with standard protocols and intelligence sharing to undercover incitement before it escalates into violence. In a televised speech, he warned Western governments and demanded, global Noahite's coming whether you realize it or not. I had 4 people watching at one point. You'll be sad you weren't watching. I demand that Western governments to do what is necessary to fight anti-Semitism and provide the required safety and security for Jewish communities worldwide. They would be well advised to heed our warnings, and I demand action from them now. This is important to mention here that Arabs, including Palestinians, are historically and ethically the real Semites, while the majority of Jewish Israelis, particularly their leaders, are not Semites, but the worst anti-Semites.